Good evening and welcome to another video. I'm just doing a really quick one right now because someone's just asked me on Twitter today what the best way is to stretch watercolour paper before use, and as I need to stretch some to paint with tomorrow, I thought I'd do it now. Now we're in a slightly odd location. We're actually in my shower because it's the easiest place for me to do this without making a total mess. I've got here a really useful box, as I think they're called, and it's about 8 to 10 litres in size, filled with cool water. It's not freezing cold, but it's not hand hot either. Important you don't use hot water because you'll dissolve the sizing off of the paper, and if you do that you're going to end up with paper that soaks in the paint and the water and you won't be able to get washes. I've cut down an imperial sheet of Bockingford to be the size of the board that I want to mount it onto to stretch. It's slightly too big for this tub. That's not a really huge problem. I can still submerge it. That won't be a problem. Now this is £300 Bockingford from St Cuthbert's Mill, and just to give a disclaimer, St Cuthbert's Mill gave me this paper for review. They gave me several packs of 10 sheets of Imperial Bockingford. Thank you, St Cuthbert's Mill. And I'm sort of playing with them, reviewing them, comparing them with their other papers, and actually having quite a lot of fun doing so. So I'll start the process now. The important thing to note is with this weight of paper, this is £300, so whatever that is, 425 grams per square metre, cold press paper, that needs 8 minutes soaking. So what I'm going to do is put it in, go away and do another video, come back in 8 minutes and show you what to do with it. So I'm going to put it into the water, and the important thing is you start the timer once you've saturated the whole thing. It's important not to touch the surface you intend to paint on, and I always soak with the surface I want to paint on uppermost so that I get it the right way around. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in, because it's slightly too big as I said, with just the edges, which are the bits I'm not going to paint on anyway, sticking out. And what I'll do is during the 8 minutes I will come back and slide that back and forth and make sure that these get completely soaked. Now the idea of stretching is this paper is going to soak in water and it's going to expand and it's going to stretch. What we're then going to do with it is stick it onto a board by the edges so that when it dries out overnight, it doesn't shrink back, it stays stretched, and that means when we wet it during a wash, we're not going to have any problems at all with this paper because it will stay tight as a drum and we'll be able to paint beautiful thick washes with no issues. So I know I've just talked for 30 seconds since putting it in, so in 7 minutes and 30 I will come back and get this stuck to a board. Okay, welcome back. This paper has had about 7.5 minutes, I guess, just so that I've got time to tell you what I'm going to do next. What I've got is, and the focus is terrible because I'm focusing on a white object and the camera doesn't cope well. I've got here a drawing board, a masonite drawing board. These are about £3 in the big box craft stores in the UK. You can use a piece of MDF, marine ply, anything as long as it's okay with water and it isn't going to warp. Because what you really need is when this is wet for it to not bend, which will allow the paper to bend. So the first thing I'm going to do is just rub some water over the surface because it's important that the surface is wetted, and you'll find that the more times you do this with a board, the easier it will get. Don't use a board that's had any ink or anything water soluble on it. I have dedicated boards I only use for stretching paper because that avoids any problems of staining the paper. So just wetted it, it's not precise, it just needs to be dampened. And what I've got here are some strips I have cut of gummed tape that is used for framing pictures, it's used for packing. I've cut them and put the roll away because if you have the roll anywhere near water, you will stick the roll to itself, because when this stuff gets wet, it's not like gum paper, it's really strong stuff, okay? So I've cut some strips that are the length of the board and some that are the width of the board, and I've got those all ready for me so that when I start actually doing this, it'll be easy. So first of all, I'm just going to take the paper out and I'm going to let it dry. Now I'm holding it by the edge because it's really important when you do this that you don't touch the areas you want to paint onto. Now I know this is slightly too big for the board, but that's okay. it's only too big in one particular place, and I'm going to work around that. So I'm going to put it on there, and I'm just going to put it on, and it will curl. It will curl, that's okay. What I'm going to do to prepare the tape is I've got my little mister bottle, which are the ones you buy in the supermarket that they sell, so that when you take things on holiday, you can make sure you're not taking so much that the airports sort of ban you. And what I'm going to do is I've just wetted it, and I'm just going to stick down one of the short edges. I always cut the tape too long so there's an overhang. That's just how I do it. And I find the best way to wet the gum is just to mist it. If you dip it in water, you can wash the glue off, and then you will find that it won't stick. I try not to overlap too much. Maybe a ½ centimetre to a centimetre is enough. If you overlap more than that, you're wasting paper. If you overlap less than that, it won't stick. So you rub it thoroughly on the paper and on the board. You don't need to be ultra precise at this stage. You can worry about that when you've got all 4 sides stuck down, because the critical thing is before this paper starts to shrink back, that we've got it good and stuck on the edges so that it will stay where we want it. Now on this edge, because the paper isn't quite the right size for the board, I'm going to go over, and that's okay. You can do that. You can fold it over as long as you dampen the edge at the back so that it doesn't peel back off. I'm sorry I'm sort of grunting and groaning. As many of you know, I am quite seriously mobility impaired, and being in a kneeling position to do this is not the easiest thing in the world, but I need this paper. One thing that is important to note is once you put it on, you can't move it around or reposition it very easily. It's a done deal. So I've got the side stuck down now. That's really straightforward. What I have to do now is let it dry. Now if this was a cotton paper like Strathmore, sorry not Strathmore, Saunders Waterford, that's the cotton paper I use, or Langton Prestige, not to be confused with Standard Langton, which is not a cotton paper, I might leave it in the airing cupboard or somewhere just slightly warm. As this is a chemical pulp paper, that's still a wood paper, but it's wood paper in which it's processed in a slightly different way, where all of the lignin is removed, so it's a sort of cellulose only paper, Bockingford. You will want to let it dry sort of room temperature, I guess. I wouldn't put it somewhere too hot, I wouldn't put it somewhere too cold where it won't dry fast enough, it might go mouldy. The sizing that is on these papers, I'm just trying to remove a hair that's stuck on the edge by rolling it off. The sizing that is on these papers is interior and exterior. That is to say, there is a kind of gluey substance inside and a gluey substance on the surface. That is what stops the water soaking in quite so much when we're working with it and allows us to do lovely washes. That becomes very unstable during the soaking process. So if you touch this area, you may find that you end up with a fingerprint-sized blob later on that one paints over and makes a total mess. So it is probably prudent to make sure you really don't touch this surface. Now what I normally do is I have a whole stack of these masonite boards, and what I will normally do is once a week I will stretch different size papers, and I will usually stretch on one side of the board and then the next day stretch something on the other side of the board, and then I stack them up, and so that I've got about 10 or 20 sheets of paper ready to draw on or paint on at any point in time. And sometimes I'll do 2 half-size pieces or 4 quarter-size pieces, so that they're always there, and I've always got stretched paper ready, because nothing pisses me off more than thinking, well, I'll just do a quick little sketch on this small piece of paper and it buckling when I'm doing, and when I say sketch I mean a little watercolour sketch, not a drawing sketch, and it really annoys the hell out of me when that happens, because it can ruin a wash. And I have to say, sorry St Cuthbert's Mill, Bockingford heavier papers, £300 and higher, do need stretching. Even their really heavyweight papers, they're sort of, they have some papers in one of the ranges that's 600 grams per square metre, or similar to that, and even that does benefit from stretching. I'm not going to say it needs it because it's kind of subjective. We all paint with different amounts of water, but for me, these papers really need it, and certainly papers like Cotman, like Langton Prestige, all of the Daler and Rowney papers, all of the Winsor and Newton papers, they all absolutely need stretching. These more expensive artist papers like the ones from St Cuthbert's Mill or any of the other suppliers, Archers and so on, Some of them do, some of them don't, and it does also depend to an extent what you're doing. But when in doubt, stretch the paper. It is a little bit of time invested. You've got to plan ahead by a day. I stretch my papers once a week. Life is much easier that way. Thank you very much, and if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Just to add, I know there is more than one way to skin a rabbit here. There are other ways to stretch paper. You can just spray it. Some people do that. I personally can't get it wet enough doing that to stretch it fully, and I find it still cockles. If I do this, it is tight as a drum and it paints beautifully. So this is how I do it. It's optimized for me by me. You might do it other ways. Please share them in the comments, because I think the best way for everybody to learn is by sharing with each other what doesn't work. Okay, thank you very much.